I'm Marcus. I'm 30 years old, and nothing in this world, absolutely nothing, can prepare you for the moment you watch your own brother slap your 6-year-old daughter across the face at a family reunion. Before I tell you how a simple voice memo on my phone didn't just get him fired, but unraveled a web of family secrets that had been strangling us for decades, do me a favor and let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. It means a lot to know I'm not just talking into the void here. It all started with a feeling in my gut. A familiar, cold dread that always settled in my stomach before any Thompson family gathering. For 3 solid years, I'd managed to avoid them. 3 years of blessed, uncomplicated peace. But my daughter, Lily, was getting older. She was starting to ask questions, her innocent face full of curiosity. "Daddy, why don't we see Grandma and Grandpa more? Don't I have an uncle?" My ex-wife, Jessica, had been out of the picture for a few years now, and the weight of being Lily's entire world was immense. I felt this crushing pressure to give her what I never had, a big, sprawling, seemingly happy family. So, against my better judgment, I packed our bags for the annual reunion at my parents' sprawling lake house. I kept telling myself like a mantra, maybe this time it'll be different. Maybe they've changed. But 30 years of living as the family's designated disappointment teaches you a few things. Hope is a luxury, but self-preservation is a necessity. I remember the last reunion I'd attended, right before the divorce. Derek had gifted me a self-help book titled Finding Your Drive, a not-so-subtle jab at my administrative job. My mother had praised him for being so thoughtful. That memory was burned into my mind. So, as I pulled into the long gravel driveway, flanked by my father's gleaming German sedan and my brother's monstrous SUV, I performed a small, private ritual. It was a habit born from years of psychological warfare. I took out my phone, navigated to the voice memo app, and pressed the small red button. The timer started ticking silently. I slipped the phone into my front shirt pocket, positioning it so the small microphone at the top had a clear shot. It was my silent insurance policy. Not because I ever expected physical violence. My family's cruelty was usually more sophisticated than that. But because I needed a record of reality. I needed proof for my own sanity to listen to later and confirm that I wasn't the crazy, oversensitive one they always made me out to be. The slap came out of nowhere, yet felt like it had been coming my whole life. We were at the big farmhouse table for breakfast the next morning. The air was thick with the smell of bacon and my father's cigar smoke. Lily, my sweet Lily, was at the kids' end of the table, happily coloring in her book and humming a little song from her favorite cartoon. It was a soft, tuneless little melody, the sound of pure contentment. But in a family that ran on tension, contentment was a disruptive frequency. As she got more into her drawing, her humming grew a little louder, a little more confident. I saw my brother, Derek, the golden child, the youngest VP in his firm's history, the living embodiment of all my failures, visibly tighten. His jaw muscle bunched. Then, Lily, lost in her colorful world, hit a high note, full of nothing but 6-year-old joy. It happened so fast. Before I could even form the words, "Lily, honey," a little quieter. Derek was on his feet. He wasn't yelling. He was unnervingly calm. He crossed the space between them in 2 long strides and his open palm cracked across Lily's cheek. The sound was sharp, ugly. It sliced through the morning chatter and left a ringing silence in its wake. Lily's head snapped to the side, a gasp of shocked air escaping her lungs. A bright, angry red handprint began to bloom on her delicate skin. Her lip began to tremble, her big brown eyes filling with confused, terrified tears. "Like father, like daughter," Derek sneered, a cruel, satisfied twist to his lips as he looked down at her. "Both are useless. Can't even behave properly in public." A choked, strangled sound escaped my throat, but it was immediately drowned out by the noise that followed. It was the sound that would haunt me for weeks. It was my mother, Eleanor. She laughed. A light, airy, tinkling sound. The sound of endorsement. The sound of complicity. It was 1,000 times more violent than the slap itself. My father, Howard, didn't even look up from his coffee cup. He just smirked. "Well," he said, his voice dripping with a familiar, weary condescension. She needed to learn some shame. I stared at them, my vision tunneling, the world reducing to their three smug, callous faces. In that instant, as I launched myself forward to scoop my sobbing, trembling daughter into my arms, the rage that erupted in me was volcanic. It was 30 years of slights, of being overlooked, of being belittled, all igniting at once. I held her tight, shielding her from them, and the only thing I could feel besides the fire in my veins was the cold, hard weight of the phone in my pocket. It was no longer a tool for my own sanity. It was a weapon, and as I walked out of that house without a single backward glance, I knew, with a terrifying and righteous certainty, that I was finally going to war. To understand why I didn't just drive away, block their numbers, and let the anger fade into a familiar, dull ache, you have to understand the architecture of my childhood. In the Thompson family, there were two roles, the hero and the sidekick, or, more accurately, the golden child and the scapegoat. Derek was born for the spotlight. I was born to be the background against which he shone. My entire life was a collection of quiet moments where I learned my worth was conditional, and the conditions were set by my brother's successes. I remember my 10th birthday. I was obsessed with space, and all I wanted was this big, complicated Lego model of the space shuttle. I'd circled it in the catalog for months. My birthday came, and I tore open the biggest box, my heart hammering with hope. It was a telescope, a very nice, very expensive telescope. "Wow," I'd said, trying to hide my disappointment. "It's a real one, Marcus," my father said, clapping me on the shoulder. "A scientific instrument. Your brother is the athlete. You can be the smart one." The message was clear. My interests were only valid if they fit into the pre-approved narrative. The sting of it was that Derek, whose birthday was 3 months later, got the exact Lego set I had wanted. He spent an hour on it, got frustrated, and I was the one who ended up finishing it for him in secret. He took all the credit. When my dad praised him for his patience and skill, I just stood there, silent. That was my role, the ghostwriter of my brother's achievements. Then there was the time I made the varsity soccer team as a freshman. It was a huge deal for me. I wasn't a natural athlete like Derek, who seemed to excel at everything without trying. I had worked for it, running drills until my lungs burned, practicing until it was too dark to see the ball. The day I saw my name on the list, I felt a foot taller. I ran home, bursting to tell them. I found my parents in the kitchen with Derek. He was holding a letter. He'd been accepted into a summer business program for high school students. It was prestigious, and it was another jewel in his crown. "Dad, Mom, I made it. I'm on the varsity team," I announced, unable to contain my excitement. "Oh, that's great, honey," my mom said, giving me a quick hug before turning right back to Derek. "Howard, listen to this. The program director says Derek has unlimited executive potential. Isn't that something?" My father beamed, reading the letter over Derek's shoulder. "That's my boy. Knew you had it in you. We need to get this framed." My soccer achievement vanished. It was a footnote on the day of Derek's triumph. We spent the rest of the dinner talking about Derek's future, his potential, his inevitable success. I just pushed my food around my plate, the victory tasting like ash in my mouth. I learned another lesson that day. My accomplishments were only valid in a vacuum. The moment they had to compete with Derek's, they ceased to exist. This dynamic, of course, carried into adulthood. When I met Jessica in our sophomore year of college, it was like breathing fresh air for the first time. She was a whirlwind of laughter and sharp wit, and she looked at me like I was the only person in the room. She didn't know Derek. She didn't care about my family's pecking order. She just saw me. We fell in love with the reckless abandon of 20-year-olds, and we decided to get married right after graduation. I knew it would be a struggle. I was starting an entry-level administrative job. She was going to grad school. We were going to be broke. But we were happy. We were building something that was ours. My parents, naturally, saw it as another example of my poor judgment. They flew in for the wedding, their faces etched with polite concern. "Are you sure you're ready for this, Marcus?" my mother asked me during the rehearsal dinner. Marriage is a huge financial commitment. Derek waited until he was established. The wedding itself was beautiful. A small affair we'd paid for ourselves with savings and a little help from Jessica's parents. The ceremony was perfect. The wound came, as it always did, from Derek. As my best man, he stood up to give the toast. A champagne flute in his hand and a condescending smirk on his face. "I'd like to propose a toast," he began, his voice smooth and confident. "To my little brother Marcus. He's always been a romantic, a dreamer. While some of us were drafting 5-year plans, Marcus was drafting love poems." A few of his friends snickered. "He's always chosen the path less traveled by, and usually less paved." More laughter. "But today, he's convinced the beautiful Jessica to join him on this adventure. We all wish you the best. You're a brave woman, Jessica." He raised his glass. "To the happy couple. May your love be stronger than your credit score." He sat down to applause from his side of the room. I looked across the table at my parents. My father was chuckling, nodding in approval at his son's wit. My mother was smiling, basking in the reflected glory. They didn't see the insult, or if they did, they agreed with it. I felt Jessica's hand find mine under the table. She squeezed it hard. She was my anchor in that storm of casual cruelty. Later that night, as the party was winding down, Paul, my cousin-in-law, found me by the bar. Paul was married to my mom's niece, so he was a peripheral family member, an observer. He was a quiet, unassuming architect, and he always seemed to see things other people missed. "Hey," he said, handing me a beer. "Don't let that get to you." It was a garbage speech. "It's just what he does," I mumbled, taking a long drink. "I know," Paul said, his eyes serious. "But it doesn't make it right. You and Jessica, you guys are the real deal. Don't ever forget that." That small moment of validation from someone on the inside meant more to me than he could ever know. It was a reminder that I wasn't crazy. The poison was real. For years later, Lily was born, and everything changed. Holding her in my arms, this tiny, perfect human being who depended on me for everything, it was like a chemical reaction in my soul. All the years of feeling second best, of craving my family's approval, it all just burned away. It didn't matter anymore. All that mattered was her. I looked into her big, trusting eyes and I made a vow. I would be her shield. She would never have to audition for love. She would never be made to feel that she was not enough. I would break the cycle. My marriage to Jessica didn't survive. It was a slow, sad erosion. My family's constant disapproval was like acid rain, weakening the foundation of our relationship. Derek would make jokes about Jessica's grad school debt. My mother would send her articles about the importance of stay-at-home moms. My father would pointedly ask about my salary in front of her. They made her feel like she, and by extension our life together, was a disappointment. It wore her down. It wore us both down. She had an affair with a professor. We tried counseling, but the trust was shattered beyond repair. The divorce was amicable, but it left me a single father treading water. My job as an administrative assistant paid the bills, but just barely. There was no cushion. So when the transmission on my 10-year-old car decided to die, or when Lily needed braces, I had no choice. I had to swallow my pride and call the bank of Dad. Each call was a fresh humiliation. The money always came, but it was accompanied by a long, sigh-filled lecture. "Marcus, you're 30 years old." My father's voice would boom over the phone. "You have a daughter to think about. When are you going to get serious about your career? Your brother just closed a 7-figure deal. He has a portfolio. You have emergencies. You need to be more like him. You need to plan." I would sit there, my phone pressed to my ear, my face burning with shame, and just take it. "You're right, Dad. I know. Thank you for the help. It was the price of survival." So, you see, my decision to go to the reunion wasn't just a simple choice. It was a pilgrimage of hope. I looked at my bright, happy daughter and I thought, for her, I will face them. For her, I will endure the casual insults and the condescending praise. For her, I will walk back into that beautiful house that always made me feel so ugly inside. That was the hope I carried with me. The fragile, desperate hope that they would finally see the wonderful little girl I was raising. And maybe, just maybe, they would see that I wasn't a complete failure after all. It was that hope that my brother slapped. It was that hope that my mother laughed at. It was that hope that my father watched bleed out on the floor with a smirk on his face. And it was the murder of that hope that finally turned the scapegoat into a hunter. The atmosphere at the lake house was a masterclass in performative family harmony. My mother, Eleanor, immediately enveloped Derek's 2 children in a dramatic hug, cooing over how much they'd grown. Lily, standing beside me, got a quick, distracted pat on the head. "Oh, and Lily, you're here too. How nice." My father, Howard, was holding court by the massive stone fireplace, a glass of expensive scotch in his hand. He was telling a group of relatives, a captive audience, about Derek's latest triumph. "The board is fast-tracking him for the C-suite," my father declared, his voice booming with pride. He clapped Derek on the shoulder. "He's got a killer instinct. Always has. He sees the chessboard in a way other people just don't." I tried to insert myself to make my daughter visible. "Lily's reading at a 3rd-grade level already," I said, my voice feeling thin and reedy in the large, wood-paneled room. "She just turned 6. My father glanced over, his eyes barely registering me. "That's nice, Marcus. Good for her. You know, Derek's son is already learning Mandarin." He turned back to his audience, dismissing me completely. "Anyway, this new hedge fund he's launching." I was a ghost with a daughter he was desperately trying to keep from inheriting his invisibility. I retreated to the kitchen under the guise of getting a drink. Paul, my cousin-in-law, was there, fiddling with a camera lens. He was the designated family historian, a role that gave him the perfect excuse to be an observer rather than a participant. "Working on the next Oscar winner?" I asked, forcing a smile. He gave me a weary, knowing look. "Just capturing the Thompson dynasty for future generations to marvel at." His voice was laced with a dry irony that was like a secret handshake. "Someone has to document the glory." We shared a brief look of mutual understanding, 2 sane men in a very polite asylum. It was a fleeting moment of connection before the performance resumed. The next morning at breakfast, the storm broke. The long, polished oak table was laden with food. Lily was happily munching on a pancake, humming her little song. It was a picture of innocence. But innocence in my family was often treated like a provocation. I saw the signs. The way Derek's fork stilled every time Lily's voice rose. The way my mother shot me a tight, annoyed look from across the table, a silent command to control my child. I was just about to lean over and whisper to Lily to hum a little softer when it happened. The slap wasn't just a sound. It was an event. It was a punctuation mark that ended 30 years of me trying. In the ringing silence that followed, Lily's shocked, painful cry was the only thing that existed. My reaction was pure, unthinking instinct. I was out of my chair and by her side in a heartbeat, scooping her up, turning her away from them, shielding her with my own body. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. "What the hell is wrong with you?" The words tore out of my throat, raw and ragged. I turned on Derek, my entire body shaking with a fury I had never let myself feel before. "She is a child, a 6-year-old child. You do not put your hands on her." Derek, my successful, polished brother, looked at me with utter contempt. He wiped his hand on his linen napkin as if he'd just touched something foul. "Oh, for God's sake, Marcus, calm down." It was a tap on the cheek. She was being loud and disruptive. Someone had to teach her some manners. She was singing. I yelled, my voice cracking with disbelief. She was happy. That's when the enablers stepped in, their roles as familiar as a well-rehearsed play. "Marcus, you are making a scene," my mother said, her voice a soothing, poisonous lullaby. She was more concerned with the disruption than the cause of it. "You're upsetting everyone." Derek barely touched her. My father, the judge and jury, stood up, placing a hand on Derek's shoulder in a gesture of solidarity. His face was a mask of cold disappointment, aimed entirely at me. "Your brother is trying to instill some discipline," a concept that seems foreign to you. The girl is undisciplined. She needs to learn that the world does not revolve around her. I stared at them, my mouth agape. The betrayal was so staggering, so complete. It left me breathless. They weren't just making excuses for an abuser. They were siding with him. They were pathologizing my daughter's joy. In their twisted worldview, Derek's annoyance was a legitimate grievance, and Lily's pain was a disciplinary lesson. "We're leaving," I said, my voice barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of a final judgment. I held Lily tighter, her small body trembling, her sobs muffled against my shoulder. "Don't be so melodramatic," my mother sighed, rolling her eyes as if I were a teenager throwing a tantrum. But my father saw the look in my eyes. He saw that this wasn't a tantrum. This was an amputation. He dropped the pretense of disappointment and went for the kill. "You walk out that door, Marcus, you are on your own," he said, his voice low and dangerous. It was his checkmate move, the one he'd always held in reserve. "The bank of Dad is officially and permanently closed. When you can't make your rent next month, don't bother calling." The threat hung in the air, thick and ugly. It was the chain he'd used to yank me back into line my entire adult life. My financial precarity was his power. In the past, the fear of failing Lily, of not being able to provide for her, had always been enough to make me swallow my pride and crawl back. But not this time. This time he wasn't just threatening me. He was using that threat to endorse the abuse of my child. I looked him dead in the eye, letting him see the full depth of my contempt. "I hear you," I said, and without another word, I turned my back on him, on all of them, and walked out. The heavy screen door slammed shut behind me, the sound of a final, irrevocable end. I was fumbling with my car keys, my hands shaking so violently I couldn't get the door open. I finally managed it, gently strapping a still sobbing Lily into her car seat. As I closed her door, I looked up and saw Paul standing on the porch. He just stood there for a moment, his face a mixture of pity and something else. Resolve. He gave me a short, sharp nod before turning and disappearing back into the house. As I drove away, the idyllic lake house shrinking into a picture-perfect postcard of dysfunction in my rearview mirror. A strange sense of calm washed over the rage. I was terrified, but I was also free. The worst thing they could do to me had been done. The leash was broken. That night, back in the sanctuary of my small apartment, after I had put a finally sleeping Lily to bed, I sat in the dark and replayed the day. But I didn't just replay it in my head. I took out my phone, plugged in my earbuds, and pressed play on the recording. It was all there, crystal clear. The morning sounds, Lily's happy humming, and then the sonic boom of the slap, Lily's cry, and then the voices, their true voices. Derek, like father, like daughter. Both are useless. My mother's light, tinkling laugh. My father, well, she needed to learn some shame. I listened to it once, then twice, then a third time. It wasn't just a recording of a crime. It was a recording of their souls. It was the audio track to my entire life, the proof that the problem wasn't me. It was them. A part of me wanted to delete it, to just walk away, cut them off and disappear. It would be easier, cleaner. But then an image of Lily's face, the red handprint stark against her pale skin, flashed in my mind. If I walked away now, I would be teaching her that this was acceptable. That when people with power hurt you, the noble thing to do is to absorb the pain and disappear. I would not teach my daughter to be noble. I would teach her to fight. I picked up my phone, my fingers steady now. I scrolled to a name that meant safety and strategy. It rang twice. "Ben? It's Marcus. Hey man, you sound different. What's up?" I took a deep breath, the cold, clear air of a new purpose filling my lungs. "I need your help," I said. "I have proof, and I'm going to burn them to the ground." The next 2 days were a blur of cold, calculated action. It felt like I was moving through someone else's life, a more decisive, more ruthless version of myself. My first stop was Dr. Evans, our pediatrician. I walked into the familiar, brightly colored office, the scent of antiseptic cleaner in the air. "Hi, Dr. Evans," I said to the kind, gray-haired woman who had been Lily's doctor since birth. "We had a little incident over the weekend. I just wanted to get Lily checked out, make sure everything's okay." She led us into an examination room. She was gentle with Lily, making her laugh with a funny-looking otoscope. Then she tilted Lily's face to the light. The redness was gone, but a faint, yellowish bruise was starting to form on her cheek. "This looks like more than a little incident, Marcus," Dr. Evans said, her professional warmth replaced by a serious concern. Her eyes met mine, asking the question without saying the words. I swallowed hard. The shame was a physical thing, a rock in my throat. It felt like a confession of my own failure to protect her. "It wasn't an accident," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "She was struck by an adult family member." Dr. Evans's expression hardened into one of professional resolve. She didn't press for details. She just nodded, turned to her computer, and began to type. I saw the words on the screen as she documented it in Lily's official medical chart. Faint subcutaneous contusion on left zygomatic arch, consistent with traumatic impact from an open hand. Patient's father reports the injury was deliberately inflicted by an adult male relative. She printed a copy of the report for me, along with a referral to a child psychologist she trusted. Holding that piece of paper felt like holding a shield. It was my story, translated into the unimpeachable language of medicine. It was fact. It was proof. My second stop was Ben's gleaming downtown office. Ben and I had been friends since we were broke college kids eating instant noodles. Now he wore $1,000 suits and dismantled corporations for a living. He was the smartest, most strategic person I knew. He ushered me into his office, a glass-walled box overlooking the city. He listened to the whole story, his face impassive, but I could see a muscle twitching in his jaw. When I was done, I placed my phone on his polished mahogany desk. "Now listen to this," I said. I played the recording. When my father's final, damning words faded into silence, Ben leaned back in his leather chair and let out a long, slow breath. "Jesus, Marcus," he said, his voice a low rumble. "I always knew your father was an ass and your brother was a prince of douchebags. But this is a whole other level of rot. So what's the move?" I asked, my heart pounding. "The police? A lawsuit?" Ben shook his head, already in lawyer mode. "No. A criminal charge would be your word against theirs, and your father would bring in his army of legal cronies to paint you as unstable. A civil suit takes years and gets ugly. They drag Lily into it. We're not doing that." He leaned forward, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "We don't go for their knuckles. We go for their throat, their reputation, their money, their status. We're going to dismantle the House of Thompson from the outside in." His plan was brilliant in its simplicity and brutality. We wouldn't release the audio. We would leverage the threat of the audio. Ben spent the next hour drafting a series of letters. They were masterpieces of legal menace, polite on the surface but with the cold, hard threat of a loaded gun underneath. The letters, sent via certified mail to the CEO of Derek's financial firm, the chairman of the board of his precious children's charity, and the director of the mentorship program he was so proud of, were all slightly different but carried the same message. They referred to a deeply disturbing incident of a violent and unprofessional nature involving a senior employee, Derek Thompson. They stated that we were in possession of incontrovertible and deeply compromising audio evidence. They concluded by strongly advising a private, urgent meeting to discuss the matter before we were compelled to seek alternative and more public resolutions. "It's a corporate kill shot," Ben explained, a grim smile on his face. "You're not an angry brother anymore. You're a potential PR nightmare, a lawsuit waiting to happen. They can't ignore this." We waited. For 48 hours, the silence was deafening. I was a nervous wreck, checking my phone every 5 minutes. Then I got a call. It was a blocked number. My blood ran cold. It was Derek. His voice was not angry or panicked. It was something far worse. Amused. "A lawyer's letter, Marcus? Seriously?" He began, a mocking chuckle in his voice. "Is this what you've been working on? Found yourself a little ambulance chasing buddy? Let me guess, you want to pay out? Is that the endgame, little brother? Try to shake me down because you can't get your own life together? It was never about money, Derek, I said, my voice tight. It's about you hitting my daughter. He laughed again, a short, ugly bark. Oh, right, the slap. And your little, incontrovertible evidence. He paused, and I could practically hear the sneer in his voice. You're so naive. It's almost sad. Let me teach you how the real world works. There's a wonderful little thing called artificial intelligence. Deepfakes. Voice cloning. It's amazing what a desperate person with a grudge can cook up on a computer these days. So you go ahead, you play your little tape. All I see is a story. A bitter, failing brother, known for his financial instability, tries to sabotage his successful, respected sibling with a crudely fabricated recording. It's a tragedy, but I'm pretty sure I know who a board of directors is going to believe. The line went dead. I stood in my kitchen, the phone still pressed to my ear, a cold wave of nausea washing over me. He wasn't just going to deny it. He was going to flip the script. He was going to use my life struggles, the very narrative my family had created for me, as a weapon to destroy my credibility. The first official response came that afternoon. Ben got a call from the general counsel of Derek's firm. She was professional, icy. Mr. Thompson vehemently denied the allegations, which he characterized as a malicious fabrication related to a family financial dispute. However, given the nature of the claim, the company would be conducting a full internal investigation. In the interim, Mr. Thompson would be placed on paid administrative leave. This is bad, isn't it? I asked Ben over the phone. It's not good, Ben admitted, his usual confidence wavering for the first time. They're circling the wagons. Paid leave means they're giving him the benefit of the doubt. Investigation means they're bringing in their high-priced legal team to tear your story and that recording to shreds. He called it Marcus. It's his word and reputation against yours. The weight of that reality crashed down on me. I had fired a missile and they had an anti-missile shield. An expensive one. My father would spare no expense. They would hire audio experts to testify that the recording showed signs of manipulation. They would dig into my past, my divorce, my financial struggles, anything to paint me as an unstable, unreliable narrator. That night was the longest of my life. Couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I just sat on my couch in the dark, staring at the shadows on the wall, the silence of the apartment amplifying the panicked roar in my head. I had thought I was being smart, strategic, but I had just brought a knife to a gunfight. Derek wasn't just a bully. He was a powerful man, backed by a powerful family, and I was just me. I looked at Lily's bedroom door. A wave of absolute terror gripped me. What if they won? What if they proved the recording was a fake? I wouldn't just be a failure. I'd be a criminal, a fraud. They would ruin me, and the truth, the actual real truth of what happened to my daughter, would be buried forever under a mountain of lies. For a moment, a dark, tempting thought slithered into my mind. I could just delete it. I could call Ben in the morning, tell him to drop it. I could take Lily and move away, change my name and just disappear. But then I thought of Derek's mocking laughter, of my mother's tinkling laugh, of my father's smirk, and I knew I couldn't. Running away was a life sentence. Fighting, even if I lost, was an act of defiance. It was the only lesson I had left to teach my daughter. I had to see it through. Even if it destroyed me, I was on the ropes and I knew it. The corporate machinery was grinding, and it was set up to protect its own. My one piece of evidence was being framed as a fabrication. I felt like I was in a soundproof room, screaming the truth while everyone on the other side of the glass just saw a man making noise. He's going to get away with it, I said to Ben in a panicked phone call the next morning. I was pacing my apartment like a caged animal. He's going to turn this all around on me. Not if we change the battlefield, Ben said, his voice sharp and focused. Right now, it's a corporate dispute. It's your word against a VP's. We need to make it a family matter again. We need to force a confession, or at least get a witness they can't discredit. The idea that formed was desperate. It was a Hail Mary pass into triple coverage. It meant willingly walking back into the heart of the fire. With a deep breath that did nothing to calm the frantic beating of my heart, I dialed my mother's number. I pitched my voice to be as calm and reasonable as I could, burying the terror beneath a layer of false control. "Mom," I said, "this has gone too far. The lawyers are involved. This is going to get very public and very ugly for everyone, especially Derek. I don't want that. A lie, but a necessary one. I think we all need to talk. As a family. One last time. Let's meet at Grandma Martha's house. It's neutral ground. This is the last chance to sort this out before I have no choice but to give my evidence to people who won't be as discreet as a corporate board." The threat of public exposure of their carefully curated image being shattered in the press was the bait. I knew they were arrogant enough to believe they could manage me in a family setting. She agreed almost instantly. "Your grandmother's tomorrow at 2. Walking up to my grandmother's front door felt like a soldier walking into a minefield. The house itself was a museum of our family's history. Photos lined the hallway walls. Derek with his trophies, my parents on their wedding day, a rare family portrait where I stood slightly apart from the rest, my smile looking forced even then. I was the first one there, aside from Grandma Martha. She greeted me with a brief, searching look from her pale blue eyes. She was 85, sharp as a tack, and the unspoken matriarch of our family. She didn't say much, just gestured for me to sit in the living room, a room that smelled of lemon polish and old books. My parents arrived next, a united front of icy disapproval. Then came Derek and his wife, Natalie. Derek walked in with a confident swagger, but I saw the strain around his eyes. He was rattled. Natalie looked like she hadn't slept in a week. She gave me a brief, haunted look before fixing her gaze on the floor. She sat as far from Derek as the sofa would allow. My father, ever the chairman of the board, started the proceedings. He cleared his throat. "Marcus," he began, his voice deep and resonant, the voice he used to intimidate junior lawyers. "I want you to know that I am profoundly, deeply disappointed in you. To think that my own son would stoop to such levels of deceit and blackmail. It's frankly sickening." "It's not blackmail," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It's a request for the truth. I want him to tell Natalie what he did. I want him to tell you." Derek let out a short, sharp laugh. It sounded rehearsed. "Admit what, Marcus? That you're so consumed with jealousy that you concocted this insane story and a fake recording to try and ruin my career? I told you it's pathetic." He turned to Natalie, putting a hand on her arm. She flinched. "Honey, see? This is what I was telling you about. He's always been unstable. This was it. The moment of truth. My one shot." "Unstable," I said, my voice rising, charged with 30 years of suppressed rage. "You want to see unstable? Let's talk about a 32-year-old man striking a 6-year-old girl, his own niece, because she was humming a cartoon song." "It is a lie," Derek shouted, his composure finally cracking. He was on his feet now, his face flushed. "A desperate, pathetic lie. Is it?" I slowly took my phone out of my pocket. Every eye in the room was on it. "Then you won't mind if we all listen to this lie together, will you?" I pressed play. The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the recording. Lily's innocent humming filled the space. Then Derek's irritated sigh. Then the sharp, ugly crack of the slap. Lily's pained, shocked cry felt like a physical presence in the room. Natalie gasped and brought a hand to her mouth. Derek's recorded voice, dripping with contempt, sneered. "Like father, like daughter. Both are useless." My mother's light, cruel laugh echoed eerily. My father's voice, the final nail in the coffin, followed. "Well, she needed to learn some shame." I stopped the recording. The silence that followed was a living thing, thick and suffocating. Derek, to his credit, was a performer. He had prepared for this. He shook his head, forcing a pitying smile. "Wow," he said, his voice shaking just a little. That's actually pretty good. The technology is amazing." But if you listen closely, the background noise is wrong. My laugh is clipped. It's a decent fake, Marcus. I'll give you that. For effort. My father nodded sagely. It's clearly a fabrication. Any audio expert could tell you that. This is desperate, son. I felt the air leave my lungs. They were going to do it. They were going to brazen it out, to sit there and deny the evidence of their own ears. My Hail Mary was falling incomplete. And then, a new voice spoke, cutting through the thick web of lies. It was a quiet voice, but it had the density of granite. Enough! It was Grandma Martha. She hadn't moved from her armchair, but her eyes, which had been watching everything, were now fixed on Derek with a laser-like intensity. I was on the sun porch, she said, her voice raspy with age but carrying to every corner of the room. The door to the dining room was open. I heard the girl singing. I heard the slap. And I heard every single word that was spoken after. There is no fake. The color drained from Derek's face. My mother let out a small, strangled gasp. My father looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. Grandma Martha slowly turned her piercing gaze from Derek to me. Your brother is a liar, she said, the words simple and devastating. Then she turned to Derek again. I have watched you get away with casual cruelty your entire life, Derek, because your parents chose to be blind. But I will not sit here in my own home and watch you call your brother a liar for telling the God's honest truth. Then, she did what no one expected. She turned her full attention on my father, and her voice, which had been hard, softened with a deep, ancient sorrow. And you, Howard, she said, you, of all people, should know better. She looked around the room at the photos on the wall. You think I don't remember? You think I've forgotten the nights your own father, my husband, would take his belt to you in the study? For spilling milk at the table? For getting a B on a report card? For not being man enough? My father flinched as if he'd been physically struck. You came to me crying after he broke your arm, telling you it was your fault for falling out of a tree, she continued, her voice trembling now. You swore to me, you swore on my life, that you would never be him, that you would never raise a hand to your own children. And you kept that promise. You found a different way to be cruel. You created a throne for one son and a cage for the other, and you called it good parenting. You broke one son with a belt, and you broke the other with your silence and your disappointment. It's the same poison, Howard, just a different bottle. The room was utterly silent, save for a choked, ragged sound. It was my father. He had buried his face in his hands, and his broad shoulders were shaking with deep, racking sobs. The great Howard Thompson, the titan of industry, the patriarch, was weeping like a lost child. The authority he had worn like a suit of armor for my entire life had shattered, and all that was left was the broken boy his own father had created. I looked over at Derek. His face was a mask of confusion and horror. He was staring at our father, seeing him, truly seeing him, for the very first time. And I looked at Natalie. She was staring at her husband, Derek, but her eyes were seeing the whole toxic lineage, the generational curse laid bare. In that one devastating moment of truth, the lies that held our family together had been burned away, and the foundation had crumbled into dust. The aftermath of that meeting was not a fiery explosion, but a slow, silent collapse. It didn't end with hugs or resolutions. It ended with my father's weeping, my mother's stunned silence, and Derek's vacant, shell-shocked stare. I got up, walked over to my grandmother, and kissed her on her wrinkled cheek. She patted my hand. Go on now, Marcus. It's done. I walked out of that house and didn't look back. The war was over. Now came the messy work of surveying the damage. The corporate consequences, which had stalled, now moved with deadly efficiency. The truth, it turned out, didn't need a press release. It just needed the right people to hear it. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister who had been at the meeting, was a quiet woman, but she was fiercely moral. The day after the meeting, she was on the phone with her husband. You need to call Richard, she told him, referring to the CEO of Derek's firm, a man they knew socially. You need to tell him I was in that room. You need to tell him that boy, Marcus, was telling the truth, and that his brother and his parents lied to everyone's face. It was a second-hand account, but it came from an unimpeachable source. It was the corroboration the corporate lawyers needed. It was no longer a messy, he said, she said. It was a confirmed pattern of deceit and unethical behavior from a senior executive. 2 days later, an internal memo circulated at Derek's firm. It was a masterpiece of corporate doublespeak. It announced that Derek Thompson, a valued member of the team, would be transitioning from his role as Vice President of Acquisitions to a new, internal position as Senior Analyst for Strategic Development. It was a public execution disguised as a promotion. They moved him from a spacious corner office on the executive floor to a windowless cubicle in the basement with the data crunchers. He kept his salary for now, but he was stripped of his power, his prestige, and his future. The golden child had been exiled to a corporate Siberia. Shortly after, the children's charity quietly updated their website. His name and smiling photo vanished from the Our Board page. The mentorship program sent a terse email saying that, due to a restructuring, his volunteer services were no longer required. His social status, the currency he valued above all else, had been declared worthless. The most devastating blow, however, came from his own home. Natalie, I learned later from Paul, had gone to the meeting at my grandmother's hoping Derek would, for once, tell the truth. His brazen lies in the face of the audio evidence, and in front of his own grandmother, was the final, clarifying moment for her. It wasn't just about his temper anymore. It was about his fundamental lack of character, his inability to take responsibility. That weekend, she went back to their sprawling suburban home, the one my parents had helped them buy, and she packed her bags. Derek came home to find her in the master bedroom, methodically placing her clothes into a suitcase. "What are you doing?" he'd asked, his voice a mixture of panic and disbelief. "I'm leaving, Derek," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I cannot, and I will not, raise our children in a house where the truth is optional. I listened to you lie to your entire family. I watched you try to destroy your brother for telling the truth about what you did. What kind of man does that? It was complicated. You don't understand my family," he'd pleaded. "Oh, I think for the first time, I understand it perfectly," she'd replied, zipping the suitcase shut. "And I want no part of it." She left that day and never came back. Her lawyer filed for divorce the following week, citing irreconcilable differences. My own life began to reform in the new silence. About a week after the meeting, I agreed to meet my parents for coffee. They looked like two strangers. They were smaller, older. The arrogant certainty that had been their defining characteristic was gone, replaced by a fragile, bewildered shame. They sat across from me in the sterile coffee shop, unable to meet my eyes. "We're sorry, Marcus," my father finally mumbled into his cup. His voice, usually so booming and confident, was a hoarse whisper. "What your grandmother said about my father, I had buried that so deep. I never saw how I was doing the same thing, just in a different way." "I know," I said, and for the first time, a strange, unexpected feeling surfaced through the layers of anger, pity. He was a man who had been so profoundly broken as a child that he had spent his entire life trying to build an armor of success and control, and in doing so, had inflicted his own wounds on his children. "I don't want your apologies," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "Apologies are words. I'm interested in actions. I am not cutting you out of my life. You are Lily's grandparents, but I am setting a boundary, a hard one. You are welcome in our lives under one condition: you go to therapy. Both of you, together and separately. You need to unpack this. All of it. The legacy my grandfather left. The roles you forced on me and Derek. Everything. That is the price of admission." My mother opened her mouth to protest, a flicker of the old, defensive Eleanor surfacing. But my father put a hand on her arm, silencing her. He looked up at me, his eyes red-rimmed and full of a pain I was only just beginning to understand. "Okay, son," he said, his voice thick with unshed tears. "Okay, whatever you say, we'll do it." It wasn't a happy ending. It was a difficult, painful beginning, but the power had shifted. I was no longer the one begging for acceptance. I was the one defining it. And the currency was no longer money or success. It was honesty. It was the hard, brutal, necessary work of healing. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was in control. The 6 months that followed were like learning to walk again. At first, every step was wobbly, uncertain. But gradually, you find your balance, you build your strength, and you start to move forward. The most profound transformation was in Lily. With the help of Dr. Sharma, the wonderful child psychologist, she began to find the words for the big, scary feelings she had. They drew pictures about it, they told stories. Dr. Sharma gave her tools, ways to understand that what happened wasn't her fault, that her voice deserved to be heard. The nightmares began to fade. The nervous clinginess that had become her default setting started to melt away. She started humming again while she colored. And this time, I didn't feel a knot of anxiety in my stomach. I just felt joy. The true measure of her healing, the moment that made me break down in grateful tears, happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was picking her up from her after-school program, and I heard music coming from the auditorium. I poked my head in. The school choir was practicing for their spring concert. And there, standing in the front row, was my Lily. The music teacher pointed to her, and Lily stepped forward for a small solo part. She took a deep breath, her little shoulders squared with determination, and she sang. Her voice, which my brother had tried to silence, soared through the empty auditorium. It was clear, strong, and achingly beautiful. She hit a high note, a note that had once earned her a slap in the face, and she held it, her face beaming with pure, unadulterated pride. In that moment, I knew she was going to be okay. He hadn't broken her. He had inadvertently shown her how strong her voice could be. That strength, it turned out, was contagious. The act of standing up to my family, of taking control of my own narrative, had unlocked something in me. I started walking with my head held higher. At work, I was no longer the quiet, agreeable Marcus who just did his job and kept his head down. I started speaking up in team meetings, offering ideas, challenging assumptions. I saw that my administrative role gave me a unique, ground-level view of the company's inefficiencies. I drafted a proposal for a new workflow system and presented it to my department head. She was impressed. So impressed that when a project manager position opened up a month later, she encouraged me to apply. The old Marcus would have laughed it off, convinced he wasn't qualified. The new Marcus polished his resume and spent a week preparing for the interview. And he got the job. The pay raise wasn't life-changing, but it was significant. It was the difference between just scraping by and having a cushion. It was the end of the fear, the end of the gnawing anxiety about an unexpected car repair or medical bill. It was financial independence. It was freedom. I would never, ever have to make another one of those soul-crushing phone calls to my father again. The feeling was like taking my first full, deep breath after years of shallow breathing. I even found a new sense of purpose. I started volunteering at a local community center on Thursday nights, co-facilitating a support group for single parents. I shared my story, a censored version, of course, about navigating toxic family relationships and setting boundaries. The first time I told it, my voice shook. But then I saw the looks on the faces of the other parents in the room, the nods of recognition, the tears of empathy. I realized my pain wasn't just a burden. It could be a bridge, could help someone else feel less alone. My relationship with my family remained a delicate, ongoing negotiation. My parents, true to their word, were in therapy. The calls with them were different now. They were awkward, sometimes painful, but they were real. They asked questions about my life, and they actually listened to the answers. They started sending Lily little gifts in the mail. Not expensive, flashy things, but thoughtful ones. A book by an author she loved, a set of special drawing pencils. They were trying to learn a new language, the language of genuine affection, and while they were clumsy at it, they were trying. I even got a phone call from Derek. It was late one night, about 5 months after the meeting. His voice was almost unrecognizable. The booming, confident baritone was gone, replaced by a flat, hollow tone. "Hey, he said. I just wanted to call. Okay, I said, not knowing what else to say. Natalie and I. The divorce is final, he said. She got the house. The kids. His voice broke for a second. I see them on weekends. He was quiet for a long moment. What you did. I hated you for it, he finally said, his voice a raw whisper. You blew up my life. But my therapist. She's making me see things. About Dad. About me. About how I treated you. How I treated everyone. He took a shaky breath. I'm sorry, Marcus. For what I did to Lily. For everything. I am so sorry. It wasn't a Hollywood apology. It wasn't a grand, tearful reconciliation. It was the small, broken, pathetic apology of a man who had been stripped of everything and was only just beginning to count the cost. I know, Derek, I said, and I let the apology land. I accepted it not for him but for me. Holding on to the rage was exhausting. Forgiveness wasn't about letting him off the hook. It was about letting myself off the hook of having to carry that weight forever. I was done carrying my family's burdens. The final piece of the story fell into place during a quiet Saturday afternoon at the park with Paul. We were watching Lily and his kids on the swings. I never told you the full story of why I was filming that weekend, he said suddenly, his eyes fixed on the kids. You didn't have to, I said. You were there. You helped me. No, I should tell you, he insisted. He looked at me, his face etched with an old guilt. It was because of Natalie. About 6 months before that reunion, she called me, crying. She said Derek had gotten angry about something stupid, a credit card bill, and he'd punched a hole in the bedroom wall right next to her head. She was terrified. My stomach clenched. And what did I do? Paul said, shaking his head in self-disgust. I told her he was just stressed, that he'd never hurt her. I told her she was probably overreacting. I made excuses for him, Marcus. I did the same thing your parents did. He sighed, a heavy, weary sound. The guilt ate at me for months. That's why I brought the camera. I told myself it was for a family documentary, but really, I was investigating. I needed to see if she was right. I needed to see him for myself. He looked at me, his eyes full of regret. She tried to sound the alarm, and I didn't listen. I'm so sorry. I looked at this good man, my friend, and I understood. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a chain reaction of courage, started by a frightened woman who dared to speak her truth, even to a deaf ear. Her courage had sparked his had sparked mine. We had all, in our own ways, chosen to break the silence. Last Saturday, my apartment was filled with warmth and laughter. It wasn't the cavernous, formal space of my parents' lake house. It was my small, 2-bedroom place, crammed with mismatched furniture and Lily's artwork taped to the walls. And it was packed with my new family, my chosen family. Ben was there, locked in a heated, friendly debate with Paul over which Star Wars movie was truly the best. Aunt Carol, who had stood by me without hesitation, was showing Lily how to knit. Dr. Evans, our pediatrician, had stopped by with a bottle of wine and was chatting with my new boss from work. It was a motley crew, connected not by blood, but by shared values of kindness and respect. My parents were there, too. They'd asked if they could come, and I'd said yes. They were quiet, a little awkward, but in a way that was new and humble. They didn't hold court. They listened. They didn't dispense advice. They asked questions. They watched Lily with a kind of gentle wonder, as if seeing her for the first time. They were guests in my life on my terms, and they were learning the rules. After we finished the pizza and cake, Lily, her face beaming with excitement, stood up on the ottoman I use as a coffee table. I have a performance, she announced to the room. A hush fell over the group. She took a theatrical bow, her face serious with the gravity of her performance. And then she began to sing. It was the song from the school concert, the one about finding your voice and letting it shine. Her voice, so pure and strong, filled my small apartment. It wasn't just a song anymore. It was an anthem. It was the sound of resilience. It was the sound of a cycle being broken. As she sang, I looked around the room. I saw Ben, the loyal friend who gave me a strategy when all I had was rage. I saw Paul, the quiet observer who chose to get involved. I saw my aunt, who chose loyalty to morality over loyalty to family power. I saw my parents, their faces a complex mixture of pride in their granddaughter and a deep, abiding regret for all the years they had missed, for the song they had once tried to silence. And in that moment, I understood everything with a sudden, piercing clarity. My father and my brother had spent their entire lives trying to make me feel small, trying to convince me that I was less than. Their power was derived from my belief in my own inadequacy. But in their desperate, cruel attempt to make my daughter small, to extinguish her innocent light, they had forced me to stand up. They had forced me to find a strength I never knew I possessed. In trying to reinforce my cage, they had handed me the key. I had to break my family to save myself. I had to risk everything to show my daughter that her pain mattered, that her voice was worthy. And in doing so, I had inadvertently given my parents a chance to save themselves, a chance to finally, after a lifetime of secrets and pain, begin to heal. Lily finished her song with a triumphant final note, holding it long and loud. The room erupted in applause. She took another deep bow, her face alight with pure, unadulterated joy. I scooped her up in a big hug, burying my face in her hair, breathing in the scent of shampoo and childhood and victory. My life wasn't perfect. My family was still a complicated, fractured thing. But it was real now, and it was mine. I was no longer the scapegoat. I was the architect of my own life, the protector of my daughter's song. And that song was the most beautiful sound in the world. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it resonated with you in some way. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between keeping the peace and speaking the truth? Please, share your story in the comments below. I read every one. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.